Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, back from leave when I was exploring the fair hills of Limpopo, and they were very hot, I can say, without much fear of contradiction. And thank you very much to one of our guests on the show today, Sara Gon, for covering for me yesterday. Thank you so much, Sara, and as ever, you did an excellent job. And
Cool.
we've also got on the show Mr. Hermann Pretorius. Hermann, how are you?
I'm well. I'm good. I must say, I've got a right over there. Look, technology gives us a lot of grief, and I have my fair share of it. But over there, I've got a tiny little microphone. Well, it's not tiny, but it's a microphone that you can set to have ambient noise cancelled out. So I'm hoping the people at home are enjoying that setting, and then they're not hearing my sort of air cooler over there, sort of deboiling the space I'm in. So if it is bothersome, please let me know, and then I'll have a word with the microphone manufacturers, or just turn off the air cooler. But yeah, it's good.
Will do. All right. Before we start, let us of course get a word from our sponsor. We are once again sponsored by Bitvice. And Bitvice says, we all know that Bitcoin is the best performing asset of the past decade, and many people are accumulating Bitcoin as a strategy to hedge themselves against fiat currency debasement and government overreach. The guys at Bitvice have developed their latest product, Sat Stacker, to help you accumulate Bitcoin over the long term. Sat Stacker allows you to set up a recurring purchase order directly from your bank account, then accumulates Bitcoin for you at the frequency and amount that you choose, depositing the Bitcoin directly into your own self-custody wallet. So it's not ever in their hands. There are many use cases for Sat Stacker, from simply automating a weekly purchase of some Bitcoin for your own personal stack to setting up a long-term investment fund for your kids. Accumulating Bitcoin in an automated, regular amounts has never been simpler, safer, or more convenient. Try out Sat Stacker today. And thank you very much once again for sponsoring us. The link will be in the descriptions below. All right, let's get into the news of today. And regular listeners of the Daily Friend Show will know that this story is nothing new, but it seems as though the mainstream has decided to wake up to it. There is much concern out there in civil society about the Electoral Amendment Act. There was an article on Times Live which ran with the headline, a vote for an independent may be thrown into the rubbish bin and not count. And this highlights one of the many concerning features of the Electoral Amendment Act, which is currently on its way through the legislative process, which in effect means that if you run as an independent, it will allow you to run as an independent candidate for office. However, if you get 50,000 seats, which is enough to get a seat in Parliament, votes, not seats, votes, 950,000 of those votes will be thrown away because you've gotten too many votes. And so getting 1 million votes is exactly the same as getting 50,000 votes. And this creates an incredible disincentive for people to vote for independent candidates with the fear that their vote may, in fact, just not really count. There's been a lot of criticism from several civil society organizations, Defend Our Democracy, Ravonia Circle, Katrata Foundation, Helen Suzman Foundation. CASAC and a group of others have vowed to go on an aggressive campaign countrywide to ensure that Ramaphosa does not sign the bill into law. This bill, of course, originates from the fact that I think it was the Constitutional Court said that there was a right in the Constitution that you had to stand as an independent candidate for office without being a member of a political party. And that forced the government to change the law. And that process took far too long. A deadline was missed.
Yeah.
And now we're really running out of time before the election happens to get this all sorted out to comply with the court ruling. But the law that has been proposed really doesn't seem like it actually fits the spirit of what the court ruling was. So, Hermann, let me start with you. What do you make of all this? I'm very glad to see that a whole bunch of civil society organizations are protesting this. We did talk about some of these negative effects on the Daily Friend Show, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I must say it is very welcome that civil society or these organizations do join the party rather late than never. But this slow motion car crash, I've been following since 2020. In fact, in 2020, the IRR published a research report on possible electoral reform mechanisms or options that exist to give expression to the new nation court judgment, constitutional court judgment in the new nation case, where the court found with a majority opinion that there is this right to stand as an independent for national parliament, and they based that on the freedom of association. That currently you've got this challenge that if you want to represent your community or your country or to be democratically elected, currently the system discriminates against your freedom to associate with whom you wish, which is an odd conclusion to come to. But anyhow, the court came to it with, I think, only one dissenting opinion. And that dissenting opinion is worth a read. It is actually quite good, but the long and short of it is the court decided in 2020. Then it gave Parliament 24 months. From June 2020 to June 2022, this past June, Parliament had the opportunity to rectify the situation. Now, it took approximately, from my calculations, somewhere between 14 and 16 months for Parliament to act after the judgment came out, for the first real moves by Parliament to actually come to a stage to be able to adhere to the judgment of the court. But the problem is that was, of course, far too late. So what we ended up in was that Aaron Motsoaledi really should, this, I mean, in any other context, this should be a sackable offense. He fundamentally had a task to ensure that legislation was coming through. Him and the speaker both really just shirking their constitutional duties at an incredible level. There was a ministerial committee that,
So complying with these changes takes us, 14 months more, whereas destroying the property rights sections of the Constitution, that gets done in a week.
Yes, no, it is very telling what the ANC rushes through and what it actually drags its feet on. But there's something quite sinister here, that the minister appointed a ministerial advisory committee, a so-called MAC, to report on the optimal options for electoral reform in this case. And two opinions came from the MAC, a majority opinion and a minority opinion. The majority opinion was that South Africa should develop immediately a hybrid system of constituencies and a proportional element. We are constrained constitutionally in South Africa by the necessity that proportional representation is a constitutional requirement. So we can't just go the route of the UK or the US House of Representatives or even Lesotho or Zimbabwe. There is an actual constitutional requirement for proportionality. So we need, the MAC majority opinion said, we need a hybrid system of part constituencies, part
and hybrid systems are not that rare around the world. I know that a couple of countries, to some degree, Lesotho, Ireland has them. So there's a lot of templates from which to pick and choose from.
In fact, at municipal government, at local government, we have a hybrid system. That's why you vote on two ballots in a local election. You've got a PR ballot and a ward ballot.
Or three if you're in a district municipality.
Yes. So we're already in a situation where the electorate knows a hybrid system works in a certain way. It's already past constitutional muster, and that sort of makes sense. Now, that does require the creation of constituency systems, because there is a municipal demarcation board that assigns these wards, and that would need to be replicated on national scale, but it isn't impossible. And were there enough time given, were these people actually ready to act on the day that they should have acted early on, that demarcation of the country into constituencies would have been possible before the 2024 election. However, the minority advice from the MAC is this abortive, this catastrophic piece of legislation we currently have, where they don't really change anything. They just implement the system where on the provincial level, you can vote for independent candidates. But at the end of the day, that results in a situation either as absurd, like you just said, Nick, where almost 1 million votes go missing, or end up in the rubbish bin, Or actually, you sit in a situation where if you're a political party, you only need roughly 42,000 votes to go to parliament. If you're an independent, you need almost 100,000 votes to go to parliament. So that is blatantly unconstitutional. It blatantly breaks proportionality as prescribed by the Constitution, and it doesn't solve the problem. So the absolute nonsense here is that they dragged their feet, and by the time that their little dragging feet started jogging, they came up with an awful system. And Minister Motsoaledi was warned about this. We warned him about this. Experts in the field warned him about this. Then they missed the bloody constitutional deadline in June, got an extension. What on heaven's name would 6 months extension make if you can't use 18 months productively? And now we're in a situation where not only do we have a bill that might be signed by our nincompoop of a president, we also have the problem that at that stage it will be constitutionally challenged. So far from actually ensuring that we have a new system in place for 2024, we have the worst of all worlds where we didn't actually adhere to any sort of deadline, and the system that is on offer is catastrophically bad. Oh, and last thing from me, by the way, if you were to take this system and replicate it over the last 5 general elections, guess, I mean, I'm not going to give money for this because it's quite obvious, but guess in the comments which party on this system would have benefited with more seats in parliament at every general election.
Oh wow, I can't even begin to imagine. Maybe no, it couldn't possibly be the ANC. Sara, yeah, obviously. Sara, what do you make of all this mess? This is, I think, quite a fundamental. This is kind of like a ticking time bomb of constitutional legitimacy problems coming down the track here. What do you make of this whole story?
Sara, you are muted.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared to test your microphone with my hardy-dars. There's certain things that it's a bit like the ANC is so hates capitalism that it will not shuck off socialism and communism. I think it's a bit like that as well. The majority says a mixed system, including some level of accountability directly to a constituency. And I think the ANC just will do anything not to have anything that resembles that. And hence they went for this as you say, I mean, this circus of a system where independence can stand, but it'd be very silly to. Let's put it that way. I mean, to not have a party behind you you would just be feeding votes to the ANC and then cascading down. So I think there's an element of that just do not want any requirement to be beholden to directly to the people, to constituency. It's the only thing I can say. And then, of course, that we're talking about the minister and the speaker, not the sharpest tools in the shed, being responsible for overseeing this. And we talk, and that's a very low bar. But being responsible for seeing this, so you've got the huge waste of time, and then what's going, as you say, it will end up as a constitutional crisis. I don't know. I think that's the best I can say. You've probably covered all the nuts and bolts of it.
But Nick, let me quickly just jump in there just to say, looking forward, we've got a few options, and none of them are good. None of them are good because of the minister, the committee, and Parliament's inability to actually use 24 months productively. Option number 1, we keep the 2024 elections on the current system. But then your problem is you've got a constitutional court judgment saying that system is unconstitutional. So then you need to beg the constitutional court to suspend their finding of unconstitutionality of the current Electoral Act past 2024. Now that opens a legal and constitutional minefield that is, of the bad options, probably the best.
Right, and it leaves the election open to, say, a long-standing ruling party which suddenly no longer gets a majority in Parliament, challenging the system in courts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's going to challenge its own stupidity.
Yes, I mean, but it is brilliant in a way. You create the circumstances for crisis so that you can manipulate that crisis and benefit from it. I mean, either they are geniuses or so incompetent that they've gone full circle back to genius. But so that's option number one, is that we sort of suspend the system, take more time to have the 2029 elections on a new system. That comes with its problems because you have a standing court finding of unconstitutionality of the system. Option number two is 2024 happens on an interim system that isn't quite yet perfect, but isn't the previous one. Now, with that, you can apply the exact same argumentation for unconstitutionality to that new system and again challenge the results. The third problem, or the third option of four, is that you can sort of, by some magic, order whatever authorities there must be to demarcate municipal or wards, constituencies in the country, so that the constituency PR hybrid system can actually kick in and satisfy the constitutional court's criteria. Problem with that is near impossible. You would need a superhuman feat, and the IEC has already said that is impossible to achieve before 2024. And then the fourth worst case scenario is to move the 2024 elections to 2025 or 2026, which is also something we know the ANC have tried before, to change the election cycles of municipal and local government and provincial and national and align them. So it's just catastrophically bad that there's no good exit from here. And Nick, you accidentally said, if you win 900,000 seats in your introduction. The problem is that we're into province where that sort of ridiculousness is only slightly funny, because the Venezuelan approach to just democracy completely losing its purchase, its traction, and its claim to actually delivering a sensible mandate for governance is now, thanks to Aaron Motsoaledi, thanks to the speaker, up excrement creek without a paddle. It is really, really dangerous times.
Indeed. All right, let's move on to our next story. And this is just about, neither of these is particularly big by themselves, but together are quite interesting. And this is the general sort of chaos going on out there in the political world. So let's start off with the funny one, which is comments by ANC National Chair Gwede Mantashe for one of his prospective opponents, I believe, in the upcoming ANC elective conference, which is Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma has said that he is making himself available to contest for the position of national chairperson of the ANC. Gwede Mantashe has not taken kindly to this, saying, if the branches don't nominate you, you're not available. He also was asked what he thought about Zuma making himself available. And he said, he was my president for 10 years. I was his secretary for 10 years. I take that as the biggest joke of the year, actually. If Jacob Zuma, at 81 years old, want to contest the chairperson of the ANC, I take it as a joke. So President Cyril Ramaphosa was also asked his opinion on Jacob Zuma running for the position and said, like any member of the ANC, he can stand for any position. But I would say that at 80 years, that's another issue that one needs to look at, because at 80 years, you're rather advanced in your years, and your key role should be that of being an elder, giving advice to the ANC. That would be a wonderful role, said Ramaphosa. Completely unrelated story in most ways, but also speaking to the kind of weirdness going on inside parties. The DA, according to Eyewitness News, the DA in Joburg is about to welcome back one of its councillors who had previously defected to the Patriotic Alliance. Councillor Faisal Jaffer, who was a ward councillor in Eldorado Park. I believe he managed to win that ward for the Patriotic Alliance in the last municipal government election, causing a big swing of the vote away from the DA. However, he says that he is no longer willing to stay in the PA because they voted to bring the ANC into government in Joburg. And according to these news reports, he is about to switch back to the DA and is going to be welcomed by the DA leadership. So, a lot of things going on, and Joburg in particular continues to be a real kind of musical chairs sort of place when it comes to politics, politicians, political parties. Sara, what do you make of all this?
Perhaps it's a fairly simplistic view, but what I think Mr. Jaffa represents is something that's been of concern to me about the coalition breakdown that's occurred in Johannesburg, where and the fighting that's been between parties, and particularly because anyone who's gone over to the, as far as I can see, other than egos and ego-related issues, nothing's happened seriously enough to actually go over to the dark side. In reality, because what I would have thought is that if you either argue too hard with your partners or you do go over to the ANC, surely you're going to have a problem with your voters, because one of the reasons they will have voted for the smaller parties, any party other than the ANC, is because they want the ANC gone. And what's interesting is that almost the first test of it might well be Mr. Jaffa.
If I can say on that point very specifically, in I think it's Lenasia, the El Jamaha party ran on an extremely anti-ANC ticket. They said, the DA, you shouldn't vote for them. They're useless because they don't oppose the ANC properly. We'll oppose the ANC properly. They're now part of the governing coalition with the ANC.
No, but you see, I've had not very kind things to say about Al Jamaa in the past, because they use their very small status in a very strategic way. And I think their biggest gripe against the DA, not that this had anything to do with municipal elections, but their biggest gripe was that the DA supports Israel. I mean, go figure. Okay, so, that's going to get your water reticulated and your power switched back on. But certainly, I mean, I would have thought, there is no there's no bigger no-no than joining signs with the ANC in any way whatsoever. And I think that's probably one of the most significant things about Mr. Jaffa's move, because I think it's going to be reflected in minority support for smaller parties. I may be wrong, but it seems like A plus B equals C in this case. As for Gwede Mantashe, you've got to admire the ability of the ANC to sort of hook into a little bit of nice race nationalism whenever they get the opportunity. While Gwede Mantashe was touring an area, I think he was in the Western Cape, and as I recall, they might have been doling out 200 Rand notes, as is their wont. I'm sure the ANC's employees would want to know where the hell the money comes from. Gwede expressed his pleasure that the PA had gone over to the ANC and that other little parties had gone over, and COPE, etc., and that others were fighting with the DA, because what it really showed is they finished having their experience of quote unquote flirting with whiteness. Now, if I were a minority party, I would stay outside of the ANC's orbit just for that comment alone, because not only is he insulting the whites and the DA, but he's also essentially giving them no credit for any agency. So for Gwede to kind of badmouth his boss, I mean, don't tell me that Gwede wouldn't want a high position in the ANC at the age of 81 when he gets there, which may be longer than it seems, but the overall sort of image is not one of the first flush of youth, let's say. So I do find that quite strange. There are probably other real reasons for it, and it's not his being 81.
Herman, briefly, your thoughts on these two stories?
Yeah, so I apologize if my line isn't the best quality. I think there might be some problems, but I must say I sort of almost feel for Jaffa. It is, the Patriotic Alliance had something to offer a year ago. They were something of an undefined political entity that populist community leaders might have actually turned to as something useful. I mean, Gayton McKenzie, in and of himself, he's sort of this very, very odd bet in terms of everything. So the weird thing is that Patriotic Alliance a year ago might have been something useful, might have been something different. So I do sort of feel for Jaffa because he is popular in his community. I don't know enough about him specifically, but I must say what this sort of comes down to is the abdication or the abrogation of citizens and voters to simply demand better quality. In South Africa, we, with few notable exceptions, we sit with incredibly low quality politicians. And part of that is because the South African electorate has never actually demanded much of their local representatives in terms of sensible demands. I'm not talking about, losing your mind over things that your local councillor can't possibly control. Nick, you could probably attest to many of that. But there hasn't been this idea from the electorate at all that there's actually a standard of public service that needs to be met before you can be considered for public representation. And part of that is also that for 30 years now, every election has been a done deal before it started. So people who might have entered politics, were it more competitive, simply had no incentive to do so. And those chickens are now sort of coming home to roost, but it is also an opportunity for the electorate to rediscover, my goodness, if we had voted differently, I'm not going to say for which party or which it didn't vote, but if we had voted differently, real actual governance would have gone differently. The idea that my vote is no longer relevant, is no longer important, no matter what you do, that or that party will be in government, that no longer holds. So seriously, it's up to voters to, within the next 500 days, understand that they are responsible for the coalition instability in Johannesburg. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not pointing blame and
I think we've
if you choose. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we lost you for a second there. Yes, you are.
Sorry. Let me finish my spiel. Anyhow, the point is, unstable coalition government underscores the impact that the voter can have. And if we get the governments we deserve, if we don't vote and we complain about these things, and if we vote for small parties that are not accountable, that just do what they want. I'm not saying don't vote for small parties. There are a few small parties I love, but actually have something to offer in terms of accountability. It's very much the case that the stability of government is down to the decision of the voter. And if you don't actually take that seriously, then I'm afraid we have little reason to complain about government stability and DA arrogance or Action SA this or that or PA this or that. This really comes down to the hand the voter deals to the politicians, and it's time for citizens to take ownership of that.
Very briefly, let's talk about our little neighbor, Lesotho, who have just had their own election. And the whole political system has gone through a little bit of an earthquake in that the ruling party, the All Basotho Congress, got walloped in the election. In a new party, which was founded in March of this year, called the Revolution for Prosperity, led by a diamond miner called Sam Matekane, has just come to power with close to a majority, although still needing to make a coalition in Lesotho's parliament. His party won 56 seats out of 120. And it's kind of a little bit difficult, I think, to get a true handle on what this new party is going to do with Lesotho, if they're going to be able to end some of the incredible instability that has afflicted the country for the past, long time. If you go onto the new party's, the Revolution for Prosperity's website, and you have a look, they describe their values as freedom and liberty of the individual, honesty, integrity, equality of opportunity for all, human rights, balanced with civic duty, progress, proactive, continuous reform, and internationalism. So I see Hermann has just dropped off now, but he remarked to me before the show that their actual campaign manifesto was extremely sort of bland. So I think it remains to be seen whether they're going to be able to improve Lesotho. However, they probably can't do worse than the All Basotho Congress, who really... they had not a great run in government there, which is perhaps why they've just gotten walloped in this election. Sara, very briefly, what do you make of Lesotho's elections?
Look, I think it may or may not end well, as you said, but I think the very fact that you see essentially the old standard party being in charge for decades and decades being walloped, that in itself may augur well, if not for the immediate situation, because one cannot read into a situation that's this new and does involve coalition politics. Once change starts to happen, you're more likely to get a change that is ultimately stable. So it's certainly worth looking at. And I think, as I say, vive la différence. What can one say?
Indeed. So what's quite interesting is that this party does have, well, I mean, based off of just that value statement, that kind of seems the sort of thing I'm into. Freedom, liberty of the individual, honesty. They say that their mission is to apply the basic principles of good governance, rule of law, meritocracy, and zero tolerance to corruption and nepotism to liberate Lesotho from poverty and hunger.
10%, if they get 10% of that done, they'll be doing fine.
Right. A non-revolutionary party. Now, Lesotho is a country with more problems than you can possibly imagine. It is a very difficult place to rule, so I wish them all the luck that they can get. An interesting little turn in the politics of our little neighbor Lesotho. Anyway, with that, we are out of time for the show today. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope that you have a great day going forward. See you tomorrow. Cheers.